Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back again with another video. Today's video is featuring some products from Gina K Designs. This is the thick brush stencil, as well as this, it's adorable. It's called Little Cutie because all, the little oranges, they're called cuties. It's stinking cute. And I didn't even know it when I did this video, but when I went to go link the product, this stamp set's on sale for $9 right now. It's normally like $25 because it's huge. But anywho, so today I am going to be doing some watercoloring with my Karen Brush Pro markers. I told you guys in a video a week or so ago that now that I learned from the sets that I had tried that I do really enjoy them and that I would use them more often, I did purchase more sets. And so I bought the sky colors, the flower colors, and the sun and tree colors. I used a little bit from the flower colors. I used mostly the sun and tree colors for this. But so I am going to be stamping in Gina K amalgam ink. This is I think it's jet black. And then I'm stamping on Canson watercolor paper. This is the Monteval. And right now my watercolor piece is quite large. We will be trimming it down later, but I wasn't sure how much real estate I was going to need. So I just left it the way that it normally comes, like trimmed off my pack. So I am stamping this twice because we're working on watercolor paper. It is textured, so it's a little bit harder to get a perfect image in one fell swoop. But so I did stamp it twice, and then we're going to move right into the stenciling. Point of today's video is to use this stencil as a guide for watercolor. Some people are confident enough to go in and just create their leaves or their background freehand. Some of us are not. For those of us who are not, you can use a stencil. So I wanted this to have the look of like an orange tree, and that's why I chose the stencil that I did. In order to make this work, you need to do your stenciling with a ink that works with water. So I chose a distress ink. You do want to work in a fairly light color. We're just trying to put down enough of the stencil to give us a guideline. We're going to be going over this and adding more color. So I just kind of went in a circle oval-ish around my oranges. Don't worry if you get ink where you don't want it. Like, it was impossible for me to get it super close to the oranges without getting any ink on the oranges. But because we are starting with a lighter color and we are working with ink that works with water, I am going to be able to remove that. Watercolor is typically very forgiving. So one last thing that I did, because I wanted this to look like my little tree, I wanted my corner to have a little bit more color than the rest of the card, and so I did add some blending around the edges. Here's where we're going to go in and trim it off now that I know what my design is basically going to look like. And I just trimmed it down to an A2 size card, so now it is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I did, like I just laid that out here. I pulled out my colors. These are the colors I'm going to be using. A couple of greens, a couple of oranges, a red, and a yellow. And then in order to remove the color, again, that's why it's super important to use ink that works with water. I'm going to go in, I'm going to wet the orange, and any of the green pigment that's in there will just pick up with a clean paper towel. So that's what I'm doing. Going in, I'm adding clean water and letting it sit for a second. I know that it seems very fast because it's kind of sped up on screen, but I am letting it sit for a second or two just to kind of move that pigment around and then just absorbing it up. If you don't get it all up the first time, have no fear, just go over it again. Now that that is done, I've zoomed in here so you can see what I'm doing in the background. Since I haven't created this card before and I wasn't really sure for my color scheme, I started with my lightest green. And this is just going to give me an idea of what it's going to look like, and then I can adjust my color from there. So you also don't have to start by adding color. You can just go over the color that's already there to get an idea of the shape of what your leaves or whatever you're using is going to look like. But I knew that I was going to be like punching up the color quite a bit, so I felt pretty comfortable going in with my lightest color and then blending that out. I'm working with a number 2 round brush. That's just what's comfortable to me. You can use whatever brush is comfortable to you. And I'm not using a lot of water to blend these out. I'm just using a very little bit. So now that I know what the lightest color looks like, I know, okay, I am going to go darker than this. And for some of them, while they were still wet, I went in with the, I think it's Lush Green. And some of them, I went back over them while they were a little bit dry. It doesn't matter which way you do it. If you do it wet on a wet, you're going to get way more pigment. If you do it with a marker straight to paper on dry, you'll just have to go in again with just a little bit of water to move that pigment around. But either way will work. And then we'll look at some other ways to add the watercolor just so you can kind of get a feel of what works for you. When we're just going to go through, I will speed it up at certain points because for all of these leaves, I just did the same thing over and over, just over and over again. I do want to say though, so I used the leaf background because I wanted it to look like a little orange tree. But you can use any stencil. You could do this with flowers. You can do this with just general geometric shapes, flourishes, like anything where you want this kind of hand-painted watercolor look in the background, or as your focal point. You can do this trick with. And I think it works pretty well. I was pretty happy with the result, and it wasn't like super scary where I just had to go in there and paint in my own leaves, having no idea, you know, how to form them or shape them because I'm not a watercolorist. Like that's not something I have studied immensely. And so I have some things that I'm comfortable doing, but I like having the guide, the little security blanket. So the stencils work great for me. And I think this is the point where we are kind of going to speed it up. You do not have to do every single section. You can make a choice about which ones you're going to leave out. And if you want to leave some out, I have a way to get rid of those too, because you can see how far out my stenciling goes. And if you looked at the thumbnail, look at, I just stuck my hand right in it. This happens to me more often than I would like to admit with watercoloring because I am right-handed, and so my colors are typically on the right-hand side. So if I'm not sticking my hand in my project, I'm usually sticking my hand in my palette. And then, you know, you just wipe it off and work from there. So, what was I saying? I was saying something before I stuck my hand in the color. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it'll come back to me. Do you think so? Sometimes that happens, that it actually comes back in conversation. Other times, not so much. So anyway, I'm just taking them out as far as I want my tree to be. And then for some of the sections here in between the oranges, there isn't really a stencil there. So I am kind of freehanding it a little bit based on the shape of the leaves that I've already done. But you can do as much or as little as you would like, depending upon the look that you're going for. And if you're a person who's like, I'm super matchy-matchy, I want my stuff to match my black outline stamp, you can always put your you could either freehand outline them, or when you start your stenciling, you could outline the stencil. So at this point, everything else is dry. I had a little break because Peanut came home from school. So everything is dry at this point, and now I'm going to go in and I'm going to add in the color to the leaves that are actually stamped. And I didn't change the colors that I added. I just changed how I added the color. So in order to give these a little bit more of a round appearance, I added color to the tops and bottoms of the leaves, and then I did all of the colors at one time. So I started with just like I would do with my markers. I started with my darkest color and then went to my mid-tone and then to the lightest. I left a lot of white area in the center, which is where I will put down my clean water. And then I will take that clean water to the pigment and just kind of let it bloom however it blooms. Some people like a much smoother look for their watercolors, but I like a watercolor look when I'm watercoloring. So that's my, I guess, particular style. But you can do it however you would like. Just know the more you play with it, which is the hard part of watercolor, the more you play with it, the more one note your color will be. The more they will mix, and you will not have as much of a gradient. It will just be a flat wash, which again, if that's the look you're going for, totally fine. So, how's it been going around here? Well, it's been going okay-ish. I don't want to jinx us, so I'm not going to put it out into the universe, but it seems to be getting a little bit better with the sleeping situation. Let's talk about what I'm doing here. So I wanted to kind of fill in my look of my tree and have it be just a little bit more watercolory. And so what I'm doing is I'm going in with a very little bit of water, and I am just making the areas in between the leaves wet, which is allowing the color to bloom from the leaves into the background and just filling in a little bit more of that color. That's not something you have to do. That's just something I chose to do because I wanted there to be more green and more color variation where my quote-unquote tree is. And then we're going to use that kind of same trick of putting water all over, and that's how we're going to get rid of the rest of the stencil at the bottom. If you like the look of the rest of the stencil, you can leave it. I wanted it to be a little bit cleaner and really just have like the tree showing. So in order to get rid of all of the inking at the bottom, I'm going to blend it out. So I'm going to go in. I totally could have switched to a bigger brush for this. I just didn't because this one was already in my hand. But I'm just going to go in with clean water. I am going to lay down clean water all over this area that still has the stencil in it. And you could leave the pigment there if you like it. You could certainly leave it there and just let it kind of fade out until this lighter yellow green. But I am going to use that same baby wipe, the same paper towel trick we used to clean up the oranges. So I'm letting this sit while I'm messing around and doing other stuff. And then while that is sitting, it's picking up the pigment, and then I'll go back in with my paper towel and blot it up. One thing to note with the paper towel is you do want to kind of fold it and refold it so that you're always putting down a clean section of paper towel. If you put down a section of paper towel that has pigment on it, you will 100% sure redeposit the color, which is not what you want. So again, I let this dry. You could heat it up with your heat tool. I didn't because I'm working with such little amounts of water. It is drying very quickly. So for this orange, I started with my lightest color, which was like a yellowish orange. And then I'm going in with the next color, which I believe is amber. And then I'm just adding a little bit of that. For now, those are going to be the only two colors I use. I'm going to add color to the center where I want it to be the lightest. And then I will work that out to the pigment and then just kind of let it do its thing. I like a lot of color variation. Not everybody does, and that's totally okay. So for this orange, I'm starting with a red orange. I'm starting with a little bit of red, then a red orange, and then that amber color. And it's going to still very much look like an orange, but it is not going to be the same color as the orange we just did. You can add more or less color. You can make them all the same color. You'll see later on, I end up going back and adding just a little bit more yellow back into this. Conversely, if you don't like putting down the color first, you can put down your water first and then add in your pigment from your marker. But remember, like I said earlier, it will take more pigment because it's wet on wet. And so the ink is going to be bleeding out into the water and you will get much more pigment. And so for this one, I used the yellow, the orange, or the amber, and the red orange. And then again, I started where I wanted it to be the lightest with the clean water. And then I just made sure that I kind of moved that around. The more water you have, the less control you have. So if you feel like watercolor is way out of control for you, you want to start with less water. And if you feel like there's too much water on your brush and you don't know how to get rid of it, blot the base, not the tip. You want the tip to have the moisture. Blot the base of the paintbrush with a paper towel and it will remove your excess water. So here for this one, I did the same color combination. I left it with more shading on the right-hand side because that leaf is in front of it. And now I have to wait to do the other orange because you can't work in watercolor next to two things that are wet or they will bleed into each other. So in order to maintain what I've already put down, I have to let those dry. Since I'm working with a little amount of water, these two top ones are already dry. I added a little bit more of the amber color to that one, and now I'm going back in and adding a little bit more yellow to the top one. Remember, we used no yellow the first time that we did it, so I just wanted it to match a little bit more with the oranges that I had going on everywhere else. So I still really liked the red and the red orange. I just wanted there to be a little bit more yellow in there. For this one that's tucked all the way behind, I will be putting down my darkest colors where it is behind both oranges. So that's where I put the red at, and then the red orange, and then this amber color, and then finished it off with the yellow. And again, I will bring in my water where it is the lightest, and I will take that out to the pigment and then just kind of let it bloom. I was pretty happy with the way that they were looking at this point. I thought my oranges looked watercolory and very pretty, but I felt like the leaves in the background needed a little bit more detail. In the stamp design, there is a line that's drawn down the middle of the leaves, and so I decided to mimic that. My first try was a little bit too watered down, so I went in with a higher concentration and just went over those lines, and I did like that much better, and it just adds a little bit more detail to what's happening. So anyway, so our situation's been better with the sleeping so far. Fingers crossed. Keep us in your prayers. I still do have a little bit of a cold. I don't feel bad. I just kind of have some sinus pressure and a little bit of a cough. So it's okay. It just we're just riding it out. It is what it is. So now that everything is dry, I am going to go in and stamp my sentiment. I chose this super cute "You Are Amazing" script, but then I really liked the "Hey Cutie," which is in a different font, but they work really nicely together. So my full sentiment says "Hey Cutie, you are amazing," and I just figure I'll keep this in my back pocket to send to somebody or give to one of my kids when, you know, maybe they need a little bit of an encouragement kind of card. So yeah, it's been really busy around here. I know it doesn't seem that way because I haven't been putting up necessarily as many videos, but because I'm doing so much traveling in April, I am traveling to Columbus twice and Cincinnati once. It's a lot of travel. For somebody who has travel anxiety, it's a ton of travel. Here, what you see me doing is I'm just going in and kind of darkening up my lines. So these really kind of pop forward. Again, totally unnecessary step. It's just something that I like to do because I love a bold black outline. And then I'm going to add some shimmer. Be aware adding any sort of moisture to your watercolor can start to move it around. But yeah, so I will be doing a ton of traveling in April to go to Creativation, to go to Create, and then the third trip is actually a personal trip to see some friends. So I have to work quite a bit a ways ahead to make sure I can do those things and still have videos for y'all. So that's the whole card. Thank you so much for joining me. I genuinely appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.